Philip Marlowe is a sharp-witted private investigator with a knack for solving tricky cases. One day, he gets a job offer from Claire Cavendish, a wealthy heiress and daughter of a famous actress. Claire is desperate to find her secret boyfriend, Nico Peterson, who works as a props director for a film company. She tells Marlowe she last saw Nico at a club called Corbata and has no idea where he's gone since then. She even checked his house, but found something odd. Milk deliveries hadn't stopped, and newspapers were piling up on his porch, hinting at his mysterious disappearance. Marlowe decides to start his search at Nico's house, but the place seems abandoned. A neighbor shows up and mentions that he hasn't seen Nico in 7 weeks. According to him, Nico had quite the reputation as a ladies' man, and people often showed up at his house looking for him, including angry husbands or debt collectors. The neighbor also mentioned seeing 2 Mexican men asking about Nico just a week earlier. Curious to dig deeper, Marlowe reaches out to an old buddy, Joe Green, who's a cop. Joe describes Nico as a troublemaker, a cheater with lots of enemies. He then drops a bombshell. Nico was reportedly killed in a hit-and-run outside the Corbata Club. The accident was so bad that Nico's face was unrecognizable. Armed with this information, Marlowe visits the Corbata Club to investigate further. Sneaking around doesn't go well, though, and the guards catch him. Later, Joe reveals something even more suspicious. Nico had been stabbed before the supposed accident. Sensing foul play, Marlowe heads to the Cavendish estate. There, he encounters Claire's mother's financial advisor, Joseph O'Reilly, who seems upset after a heated argument with Claire's mom. Claire explains that O'Reilly is set to become an ambassador, but Marlowe senses tension. Before Marlowe can tell Claire about Nico's death, her stepfather storms in, accusing Marlowe of being involved with his wife. Quick on his feet, Marlowe claims he's been hired to track down some missing jewelry. Claire, however, insists Nico isn't dead. She claims to have seen him in Tijuana the day he supposedly died. Her explanation seems fishy, and Marlowe calls her out on not being entirely truthful. Frustrated, he decides to drop the case and leave. As he's leaving, Marlowe runs into Claire's mom, Dorothy Quincannon, who tries to pry into her daughter's business. Marlowe keeps quiet, protecting his client's confidentiality. However, the case keeps gnawing at him, so he visits Nico's grave. There, he spots a woman who quickly disappears before he can talk to her. When Marlowe asks Joe about the hit-and-run investigation, Joe admits they haven't caught anyone. Joe suspects Marlowe's client might be Nico's sister, but Marlowe denies it, hinting at a bigger conspiracy. The next day, Joe helps Marlowe set up a meeting with Floyd Hansen, the manager of the Corbata Club. While heading to Hansen's office, Marlowe sees the same woman from the graveyard. Confronting Hansen, Marlowe suggests the hit-and-run victim wasn't Nico, but someone else. Hansen brushes it off, claiming Nico's sister had identified the body. Suspicious, Marlowe tracks down the mystery woman, who turns out to be Lynn, Nico's sister. Lynn asks Marlowe to meet her later at a massage parlor called Cabana. When Marlowe shows up at Cabana that night, Lynn is nowhere to be found, and he ends up dealing with Hansen's thugs instead. The next day, Dorothy invites Marlowe over and tries to bribe him for information about Claire. Marlowe refuses, staying loyal to his client. Dorothy then spills a shocking secret. O'Reilly, her lover, doesn't know Claire is her daughter. He thinks she's just a niece. Dorothy suspects Claire and O'Reilly are scheming against her, possibly linked to Nico's death. She also reveals Nico had another lover, Amanda Toxteff, who works as an extra at a studio owned by Dorothy herself. Marlowe tracks down Amanda, who describes Nico as a ladies' man uninterested in commitment. She also hints at his involvement in shady dealings with some Mexicans, likely tied to drug trafficking. With this new lead, Marlowe heads back to Nico's house. While searching for clues, he finds a note on the table, but before he can read it, Lynn catches him in the act. Lynn confronted Marlowe, demanding to know why he barged into her brother Nico's house. Marlowe explained that he was a friend of Nico's and had been hired by someone to look into his disappearance. He assured Lynn that Nico wasn't dead but had faked his death. Before their conversation could go any further, 2 men burst into the house, demanding to know about a woman named Serena. Lynn panicked and tried to escape, but one of the men chased her while the other clashed with Marlowe. Marlowe managed to subdue his opponent, then followed the man who had caught Lynn. Drawing his gun, Marlowe demanded answers about Serena, shooting the man in the leg when he refused to talk. But before he could press further, someone knocked Marlowe out from behind. When Marlowe came to, he found himself at gunpoint by a man named Cedric, who worked for Lou Hendricks. Hendricks soon appeared and offered Marlowe a ride back home. During the drive, Hendricks revealed that Nico had worked for him, supplying Mexican tarantulas as part of some shady dealings. Hendricks wanted Marlowe's help to locate Nico, but Marlowe turned him down. Instead of going home, Marlowe had Hendricks drop him off at his friend Joe's office, where he reported Lynn's kidnapping and mentioned that his gun had been stolen. Joe gave Marlowe a replacement gun, ensuring he had an alibi if the stolen weapon was ever used. Later that evening, Detective Bernie Oles, acting on Joe's orders, visited Marlowe to follow up on Lynn's disappearance. Not long after, Claire showed up, eager for updates on the investigation. During their conversation, Claire opened up about her past, sharing how she had lived with nuns for years while her mother, Dorothy, pursued her relationship with O'Reilly. Claire then left, saying she had an appointment. Suspicious, Marlowe secretly tailed her to O'Reilly's house. While watching Claire, he was startled by Dorothy's sudden appearance. Dorothy was there to confront Claire about her suspected affair with O'Reilly. The next morning, Bernie and Marlowe were called to a river where Lynn's body had been discovered. Afterward, they spotted the cars of Hendricks and the Mexicans at the Corbata Club, linking them to Lynn's death. Bernie asked Marlowe to handle the investigation since he couldn't act without a warrant. That night, Marlowe sneaked into the Corbata Club and into Floyd Hansen's office, catching him using drugs. Marlowe grilled Floyd about his ties to Hendricks and the Mexicans, as well as whether Dorothy or O'Reilly were pulling the strings. Floyd suggested discussing it over drinks and secretly spiked Marlowe's drink. Pretending to be affected, Marlowe played along as Floyd revealed the truth. Floyd admitted to running a drug operation with Hendricks, the Mexicans, and Nico. He confessed to killing Lynn because she disobeyed him and claimed that Nico's disappearance didn't concern him. Floyd then led Marlowe to a room where Hendricks was being held captive, alongside the bodies of the tortured Mexicans. Marlowe was locked in the room with Cedric, but after their captors left, he freed Cedric and proposed they team up. Meanwhile, Floyd interrogated Hendricks about Serena. Hendricks revealed that Serena wasn't a woman, but a decorative statue containing hidden drugs. Marlowe and Cedric armed themselves and launched an attack. During the chaos, Cedric accidentally shattered the aquarium holding the Serena statue, washing the drugs away. In the aftermath, Cedric, furious at Hendricks, shot him dead. Marlowe and Cedric reported the entire ordeal to Bernie. When Marlowe returned home, he was shocked to find Nico waiting for him. Nico praised Marlowe's skills in uncovering his fake death, but showed no emotion when told about Lynn's murder, explaining that she was only his stepsister. Nico had a message for Claire. Meet him at the Pacific Studios prop warehouse that night, as he had something valuable for O'Reilly. When Marlowe questioned Nico about Dorothy, Nico shrugged it off, suggesting she was simply worried about Claire taking her lover. Marlowe later met with Claire and Dorothy to clarify the situation. He hinted that Nico had run off with someone named Serena and some drugs. Claire's indifferent reaction made him suspicious. On the other hand, Dorothy didn't seem interested. Claire finally revealed that O'Reilly had dumped Dorothy and was using her for political gain. Furious, Claire stormed off, leaving Marlowe to chase after her. Claire mentioned she would settle Marlowe's payments soon and agreed to meet Nico at the warehouse. That evening, Cedric drove Marlowe to the Pacific Studios prop warehouse. Along the way, Cedric shared what he had learned from working with Hendricks. The warehouse had been Nico's base for smuggling drugs and antiques from Mexico to England. Nico had been collecting evidence of his dealings to blackmail O'Reilly. At the warehouse, Nico presented Claire with a briefcase containing records of the drug transactions. He proposed using it to blackmail O'Reilly so they could escape together. While Claire examined the documents, Marlowe arrived, prompting Nico to open fire. Marlowe dodged the shots, but to his surprise, Claire turned on Nico, shooting him instead. She then set fire to the warehouse, destroying all evidence of the drug operation along with Nico's body. Marlowe let Claire go, called the fire department, and fed Detective Bernie a false version of events. The next day, Claire invited Marlowe to an event at O'Reilly's office, where she revealed that her mother had returned to filmmaking with financial backing from her and O'Reilly. Claire also mentioned that O'Reilly appreciated Marlowe's efforts and had offered him a cushy security job with excellent benefits. Marlowe politely declined, suggesting Cedric for the role instead.
If you do take the job, this might come in useful.